Steve, let's move on to Indonesia and an overhaul of its criminal code just in the last couple of weeks. That is a law that will outlaw cohabitation and sex outside of marriage. And now it is filtering down, of course, causing a lot of waves across the country in a lot of different ways. Some people are very much in favor of it, and others are not. It would take place in about 3 years, or take effect in about 3 years' time. But now the tourism industry is concerned that people will be checked for their marital status if they're checking into a hotel in Bali or elsewhere. Get us up to date on just how much this has rocked that country internally and externally.
Well, look, Indonesia scored an own goal, to put it in Neil's terms, right? When it came to this new law that just passed. I mean, this law, it's a threat to privacy. It's a threat to the press. It's an overall threat to human rights, as the UN said. Maybe we're talking about would be illegal in Indonesia because it's an insult to if it's an offense to insult the president, the national flag, or state institutions. So this is a real problem for a country that was going in the right direction. And so it takes a religious approach and criminalizes conduct that may be a sin, and now it becomes illegal. So you have the morality police that are going to come into Indonesia now. So just challenges across the board with this new law that goes into effect 3 years from now.
And Steve, just to add to that, from a tourism standpoint, a business tourism standpoint, how do you even enforce it on a practical, logistical level? You know, a young couple, international couple, Western couple, they go to an Indonesian island.
Or an Indonesian couple.
Exactly, yeah, whatever, Singaporean couple. How do you even enforce this on a day-to-day hotel level?
Well, so the law bans sex outside of marriage. And the way it would get enforced is that you have to have a complaint from a parent or a child or a relative come to the police. So that is how the law would work. So it is going to be an issue if you have a foreigner and an Indonesian are sharing a hotel room in Bali, and the parent of the Indonesian files a complaint. Yes, you could go to jail for that. So there is a lot of concern. So while the Balinese hotel officials are coming out saying, well, we're not going to check to see that you have a marriage certificate before we rent you a room, it's going to have a chilling effect. There's no question about it. The newspapers in Australia have labeled this legislation the Bali Bonk Ban, because it applies to Indonesians and foreigners when you are going to be in Bali.
Well, of course it does. I mean, Bali's a second home for most Australians. That's the go-to place for your stag parties, your hen parties, your football parties from Australia. So I can see why it would kick up a stink there.
The tourism minister did come out. The Indonesian tourism minister came out this week and clarified. He said this would not apply to foreign visitors. People and hotels will not be checking marriage licenses or whatever when people check in. But this is from the government.
The rule, no, it's not from the government. The rule's got to come out 3 years from now. So let's see. But right now, as it is commonly understood, if a tourist visits Bali, has consensual sex with an Indonesian national, it's reported to the police by the Indonesian's parent or child, that tourist could be arrested. So that is what the law says today. Now, again, it's 3 years. Let's see what the implementing regulations say. So yeah, the hotel operator may not be checking you to see a marriage certificate when you're going and showing your passport to get your room key, but that doesn't mean you're clear. So no, this is a real issue. It's an issue for tourism, but it's an issue for foreign businesses. Are you going to send your employees there? So certainly in a lot of concern in the LGBTQ community, because if you're not married, you're in Indonesia, what happens to you there? A lot of Indonesians don't have marriage licenses because they're from indigenous communities or they're same-sex couples. They are violating the law as it's written right now. So again, it's an own goal. Indonesia was so on the right track Jokowi was viewed as a growing global diplomat with the work he's been doing with the U.S., China, Ukraine, Russia, hosting the G20, and then to come out with this law is just devastating. And the U.S. ambassador's spoken out on it. The UN has spoken on it. The AmCham in Indonesia has spoken out against this. So this is just the beginning of the pushback.
I genuinely can't see, as you mentioned, it applies to foreigners rather than locals. Is that correct?
It applies to everyone.
But this tourism minister said that it would not apply to foreign nationals. Which,
on that point,
but again, Steve, to your point, it's 3 years hence, so we got to see what.
Yeah, it's 3 years hence, and then you're going to have all kinds of racial profiling elements involved. So someone who is from Malay descent but is Australian, how does that even work? You know, they look like a so-called Indonesian, but they happen to be Australian citizens. Are you going to ask to see their passport? I can't even see, one, how this is enforceable at any level, and secondly, so to that point, Steve, briefly, do you see a U-turn on this? I mean, 3 years hence, you've got so many bodies, local and international, the tourism board. Do you see a U-turn coming on this?
Well, I mean, they tried to pass this law in 2019. It was met with huge protests in Indonesia, so it was pulled back. Then, you know, somewhat off the radar screen, they amended a bit from the provisions that were in 2019, but not the criminal conduct when it comes to sexual relations outside of marriage and being applicable to everyone. And then it passes. So there is a strong movement towards religion in government in Indonesia. You saw it in Malaysia, although in Malaysia it's a minority party right now, and in Indonesia it's not. And when you overlay this, Neil, with the corruption that occurs in Indonesia, Indonesia is ranked 96th out of 180. So it's in the bottom half of the world in terms of corruption. Are people going to use this law against others for either corrupt reasons? They don't like the person and they want to get their job. They don't like this person because they're dating their daughter and they want to end the marriage. There's so much room for abuse in this law. And in a system like Indonesia, it is going to cause certainly second and third looks from tourists and from foreign businesses about are you going to go there, or are you just going to go to Phuket? Or you're going to go somewhere else for your holiday.
All right, and Steve, to wrap it up briefly, you happen to be in KL, which is a massive World Cup supporting city. You've been to London, you've been to the US, so you've been to all these World Cup destinations. What's World Cup mania been like for you on the road?
Well, so I was in London, and it happened to be the evening, and it's like 8 o'clock at night in London, where, you know, they have all the group stage games get played together. So the U.S. and Iran were playing at the exact same time that England was playing Wales. So I was there with my American friend, and there was literally one bar in all of London that was showing the U.S.-Iran game. Every other bar, every TV, and every other bar was the Three Lions. And we could not get into the one bar called the Maple Leaf, the North American bar. The line was out the door, and then we're trying to watch the screen through the window, and the bouncers are like, "No, you can't do that." Good, and so I didn't have any
it's
real.
So sad.
It's one in the entire city of London. One bar
Steve,
had
cultural imperialism, my friend. Cultural imperialism. That's one bar too many, as far as I'm concerned. You're in London. Watch England.
Oh, I thought you meant the imperialism was on the London side.
No. Enough Americana. Enough Americana.
All right.
So
Steve,
I couldn't watch US Iran, which ended up being, of course, such an amazing game. And the US got to where everybody expected, ranked 16th in the world, got to the 16. Now people are going to expect more next year, especially with the host year. But so Neil, I don't know. You seem pretty pessimistic on your team.
I am. France all the way. Vive la France.
All right, Steve, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for joining us today from KL. And thanks for also inviting Kian Ming to come on. Appreciate you doing that with him today. Great to see you. We'll see you back in the studio next week.
See you in the studio next week.